Okay, that apart from questions that have been submitted in advance, if I can ask people, if you've got questions that occurred to you during the course of the meeting, if you could please put those in the chat and we will make sure that you get a written response to them. Excuse me. You'll notice to my right that the Chief Executive's chair is currently empty. That's because Steve is just dealing with an urgent matter. He will be with us imminently. So apologies for that. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Brian and Natasha to give us a sense of the immense amount of work that our district nursing team do. And I think when you hear it, you'll get a sense both of not just the quantity, the quality, the importance of it to the people of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and the impact that it has for the wider health system. So Brian and Natasha, very welcome to you, and we are looking forward to hearing from you.
Lovely, thank you for having us. Would you like me to start, Brian, just to introduce ourselves?
Yes, yes, Natasha, that's fine, thank you.
Lovely. So I'm Natasha Edwards. I'm currently the area nurse manager for the Cambridge City North and North Villages team, and my colleague Brian manages the South City and East teams in Cambridge. So we've been asked today to come and showcase what we do day in and day out. So thank you for giving us the time and listening to us. Could we go to the next slide, please? I'll hand over to Brian.
Thank you, Natasha. Right, district nursing. According to the King's Fund, these are the 9 characteristics of good quality care in district nursing. Care for the whole person, and in nursing as general, we always do a holistic care, and we always put the person at the centre of our care, and that we deliver. With the continuity of care, yes, we get a lot of our referrals from GP practices, from the Cambridge University Hospital, Peterborough District Hospital, Arthur Rank. And as you say, our flow of care needs to be in and out between these other establishments. We work in a very collaborative, multidisciplinary way with our colleagues in the other areas. Personal manner of staff. Well, of course, we are registered nurses, and therefore we adhere to the Nursing and Midwifery Council Code of Conduct, and we always treat people as individuals. We always treat them with dignity. We listen, we respond to their concerns, so we do. We must practice effectively and promote professionalism within the service, and promote trust within the service. And that leads to accurate record keeping. We always must preserve safety of our patient and of our staff, and act without delay where we see there is risks of that. Report risks. Just good professional nursing care delivery is what we do. Scheduling and reliability of appointments. Natasha will come on to this a bit more later in detail, but we should be reliable with our scheduling and our appointments. We must, as you say, react to the demand, the service demand that is there. Being available between appointments, we currently do run a duty system so that people can contact the teams, as you say, between appointments and if there's any actions that are required from those contacts, we of course will follow them up. Any care must be delivered by valuing and involving carers and family members, and next of kin are most important. Carers, and particularly family carers, they do help a lot in the care that we deliver, and we liaise with them. So we do see what if they can assist us in delivery of care, i.e. we can train them up to give insulin if necessary, if they're capable of, and that. So but listen to them, because they know more about our patients than probably we do, and that. We act as care coordinators and advocates where appropriate to do so. We always must speak up, put the patient first, speak up for the patient and that. And where we see that there are concerns, report them to the appropriate individuals. Clinical competencies. Our staff are very highly skilled and have a lot of competencies. We do a lot of mandatory training and we do it on a regular basis. We upskill ourselves annually for certain things as wound care, as you say, dressings, etc. So we always must keep on top and be mindful of the NICE guidelines and that, and any developments in care that is required. Patient education and support for self-managers, I've already slightly touched on this, whereas you say, if an individual, we promote independence, so we do. And if an individual can do some of their care themselves, again, if I gave the example of self-administration of insulin, we would always train, teach, and approach them to give them that independence, to, promote it in all ways. Thank you. Next slide, please. This is just the geographical area we cover. We cover Cambridgeshire. There are, as you can see, Borderline, Peterborough City, Wisbech, Fenland, Ely, St Ives, St Neots, North City and North Villages, South City and East. Those are the teams that we have, the areas they cover. The demographics, which again Natasha will go into in a bit more detail later, is quite vast and differential between the different areas. Example, Cambridge City and Cambridge City South, very much, as you say, an urban area, a lot of traffic and that, whereas then Cambridge East is quite rural and has got its other geographical issues, has a distance between patients and visits and that, and it can be quite time consuming. But as you see the statistics there, 42,083 referrals in the last 12 months. 438 and 87 contacts in the last 12 months. So we're approaching 500,000 contacts in the past 12 months, which is quite a considerable amount of contacts that we are making in a 12-month period. Thank you for listening. I'll hand over to Natasha now.
Thank you. Lovely. So just really a quick run through, just to say I'm in a very privileged position to be a part of this amazing team. So we have a varied background of people that make up a community nursing team. So there's myself, the clinical lead. We have our specialist practitioners, district nurses. So they are nurses that sit separately on the register with a specialist qualification. We also have very senior community nurses, all the way down to healthcare assistants, and we're also supported by business continuity and patient flow coordinators. So across the county, we have a head count of 362. Just over 80 of those are sitting within myself and Brian's team, and we serve a population that is, no, sorry, Rick, it is inside of the county, so it's just in a different locality. So our population that we serve are over the ages of 18, and these are patients that are defined as having a nursing need that requires a home visit or in a residential care setting where clinical expertise is not available. Very, very historic. The term housebound has been attached to district nursing for years, and we're trying to move away from that because we do recognise that actually, yes, they might not be housebound, but the aspect of care that we need to provide is most appropriate at home. So, for example, that would be bowel care. We wouldn't expect somebody to go to their GP practice for that on a daily basis. So we are trying to change those sort of thought processes within the team, so we're not limiting the amount of people or excluding the right people as part of our caseloads. So we also provide ambulatory care catheter clinics in some areas. We do have one in Ely and Cambridge and Peterborough, and I believe Hunts also have one as well. And those are the people who are out and about but require catheter care in the community. So a county-wide caseload, we're just over 6,000 at the moment, which is a huge amount of people to have on at any one time. And just over 2,000 of them are sitting in the Cambridge area. Next slide, please. So come up to our positives, and this is where we're going to showcase what we're doing really well. So our opportunities at the moment in district nursing is our technology. So in the last few years, we've really improved in how we're using the technology available to us at the moment. So it was around 2016 when community nurses started to trial agile working. So that was using laptops out and about on visits, accessing patient systems. So we're able to get the most up-to-date knowledge whilst with the patient, but also able to document at the point of care, which I think we could probably all agree is the most accurate and safest way to do so. We've also been introduced in the last year or so to Power BI, which is a data platform where we're able to unpick our caseloads and our services so we have a better understanding and gain intelligence around that. So I'm really grateful for our data analysis team that has really developed that platform so me and Brian can use that to better understand our services and then hopefully identify points where we need to improve. We also have a trial coming up with auto planning, which is around our allocation and scheduling of these masses of visits that we have every day, and that's going to again hopefully release some more clinical time by using the tech in a smarter way. A workforce development. So we do have a rather robust induction and onboarding schedule for our new starters because we understand that somebody who's new to the community is quite overwhelming. It is lone working, lots of skills in any one day. So we do need to make sure that when we do recruit that we actually support those people to feel that they're one invested in but also want to continue to develop their career with us. We're very organised or try to be organised with our supervisions appraisals because we recognise that actually that is paramount to maintaining staff wellbeing, giving them the opportunity to be able to come to us with any issues or any successes that they may have had. And actually, again, we can unpick some of those issues within the teams or the service that we can then put some ideas forward and try and improve things. And again, with ongoing professional development, we've got lots of different streams on that. So we have the district nursing specialist qualification course, which is available to our registered nurses, but we also have a number of people that have come to us as band 3 healthcare assistants and they've progressed, they've become band 4s, they've then done their nursing top-ups and they're now looking at those higher education modules with Anglia Ruskin and other providers. So we're looking at really upskilling the staff that we have to be able to provide that excellent care. And of this workforce, a lot of them do live within the community, so they have an amazing understanding of the areas that they work, which then helps us to have that interface with internal and external stakeholders. So as Brian's mentioned before, the MDT approach, but also with our integrated neighbourhoods and PCNs as well, because there is still some PCNs within the locality that haven't yet moved to the IM model. One part of that is that we then go to these lovely workshops, which we can then all put our good ideas together to try and make the whole system working fit for the future. Next slide, please. So challenges. I'm just aware, Carolyn, that I've probably gone over, so please tell me if you need me to stop.
You're fine, Natasha, you carry on.
That's fine. I was clock watching. So workforce recruitment. So unfortunately, when I first came into community nursing jobs were like gold dust. We had a lot of people that stayed in the role for a very long time, didn't generally move on or progress. But in the last few years, we have noticed that actually it is harder to recruit at the moment to try and get people into the jobs and the vacancies that we have. So we've kind of been having to look out of the box of where we can actually outreach to the right people with the right skill sets. So we've been attending career events at ARU, Anglia Ruskin, or the own CPFT events as well. I will say one of the good things that we did have that has sadly ended was the new hire bonus, and that is some of the feedback that I have had, that actually a lot of people were using that new hire bonus to upgrade their car to be able to allow them to do a community job. So we've just had to think of other ideas of reaching out to people. Another one of our challenges, which is off the back of actually one of our opportunities. So we're so good at upskilling our staff and sending them on all these wonderful courses. It's just a natural progression that they are then going to look for other roles, either within CPFT or primary care, because they want to use those skills in a different way. So yes, we're doing a really good job at upskilling our staff, but we also have to understand that they will want to progress and move on, which then releases the vacancies again. One of our biggest demands, I'd probably say, and I think Brian would agree, is our insulin demand at the moment. So from our lovely Power BI platform, we can see that the number just in Cambridge number of insulin visits has doubled in the last 4 years, which puts immense pressure on our morning times and our evening times. So I've put a graph on there today, and you can actually see that 37% of our contacts are just in the first 2 hours of the day, which is huge. And these do include our really high risk poorly patients. A lot of them are on quite complex regimes of insulin, and just one thing that goes wrong in the morning really does then have an effect on the rest of the day. And the biggest thing I'd probably say is one of our challenges is the growing population with the increased complexity. And I know that is something that's been brought up in the wider sort of world of Parliament and government, that they are looking at those strategic shifts, that actually we have got a growing population and community is a better place for them to be. So I'm hoping that with all the work that we're trying to achieve on top of the day job, is also trying to align with those developments that are needed to make the service fit for the future. So thank you.
Natasha, thank you so much. That's absolutely brilliant. And we should say thank you to you and the teams before we take questions for the immense amount of work you're doing. And
thank you.
Said for the positive impact you have for those that you work with and for our partners who I know you support so well. So I'm looking here in the room for any questions. Pri, then Karen, and then Steve.
First of all, thank you to Brian and Natasha. Really appreciate the presentation, and it's amazing to see what good work is going on. And just to say, honestly, I think it's a real compliment that we're developing staff that actually are staying, are developing, and then are moving on as well. So whilst I can appreciate it creates a problem for you practically, I think actually I'd take that as a compliment that you are developing people. Well done. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
I'm then going to go to Karen and then Steve.
Good morning, Natasha and Brian, and I'll echo Pri's word. My question is linked to one of your bullet points was about residential care homes.
Yes.
I know when I've done a service visit, they raised the fact with the increase of residential care homes in our county, that is actually drawing in demand from populations outside our county. I'm just curious to know your thoughts on that and what possibly we can do, because that's an increase that just certainly as a private care home, you think they have the expertise in that care home.
Yes, definitely. And I think one of the big challenges with us as well with care homes, and they are building new care homes as we speak, they're popping up all over the place to meet that demand from social care. We don't have any say on what residents that they accept. So often or not, we just get a referral through from care homes to say we've just accepted, another insulin, and then we sort of just try and absorb that. So there is some work going on elsewhere in the county. I believe it was around the Peterborough area, and they were going to trial a few of the residential homes in taking on the ownership of their own insulin administration with the support from CPFT, and that would be around the training of staff and completing the competencies. But then also it's more the long arm support, so we wouldn't pull out completely. We would still be able to go in as and when needed, but the idea would be hopefully that a lot more care homes would be willing to take on the insulins in the long term, just to try and mitigate that risk of having so many on at any one time.
Lovely, thank you for that. It's good to hear that. Yeah, thank you.
Steve.
Thank you. Natasha and Brian echo the comments from Karen and Pri. One of the challenges was on insulin demand and time sensitive. I just wonder if there are some challenges getting around Cambridge or around the county that you might want to share.
I think probably Brian's probably the best one to discuss this one,
Yeah,
Steve.
As I just briefly alluded to earlier, yes, the city, Cambridge City itself, currently does 6 sets of roadworks in and around the Mill Road area. So visits that used to take us 20 minutes is now taking an hour to get to and from the location of those visits. Plus the fact is the Mill Road Bridge Gate, but we have put in applications to be exempt for that our district nurses can cross that bridge, because it's a bus gate bridge, isn't it? And it's only essential vehicles that's allowed through. So we have put in an application form to get our staff to be able to use that route, because otherwise it puts on another 20 minutes to go around Mill Road to get to some of our patients. Geographically, again, east is very scattered, quite rural at the time, and staff again do find it extremely time consuming to get from A to B, and that we do like staff to come back to base for handover and that, but it's not always possible in the east, and that because it's a geographical area that they cover, plus the fact when they call in for a handover, another thing is connectivity is a bit of an issue as well, let's say, particularly in the east. Does that answer your question, or do you want more information?
That's fine. Thank you, Brian. I'm pleased to note you put your application in for the acceptance.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think we'd all want to support that. I'm going to go to Ed and then to Mike.
So Natasha and Brian, thanks very much for the presentation. Obviously, very, very busy team and great work. Thank you. I had a couple of questions. One is about sort of retention, one about recruitment. So the retention question, I mean, you both look sort of young and full of beans and flesh, but
you should go to Specsavers.
Thank you very much. Great entrance.
Yeah.
I'm going to go out and have another one.
Yes, so I was just wondering, how consciously do you think about succession planning, and what's your strategy in terms of, you know, identifying the next generation of leaders of the team, and how does that help retention? I suppose that's the retention question. And the recruitment thing, you mentioned the new hire bonus had been attractive but was no longer available. Is there something else that you think we could be offering? Maybe not cash, but something else that would make these jobs even more attractive?
So your first part of the question around the succession. So I do generally use our Power BI platform, because that gives us a really good view of what our staff in post. It also, so Matt Slan, our data analysis, he's an absolute whiz when it comes to Power BI. I'm sure he won't mind me saying that. So he has been able to break it down into the staff profiles in terms of our demographics within the workforce, so their ages, how long they've been employed at CPFT, and we can then see those trends. So from me knowing my teams, I know about some of the nurses that are probably going to be looking at retiring, or, you know, that being an option for them. So we are then discussing around the retire and return options rather than them just leaving completely. We're also then looking at our newly qualified nurses who are then starting to develop and wanting to go on these courses, and we're looking at how we can create roles within the team. So we have, I didn't mention it, I do apologise, but we do have champion link roles within the teams. So for those staff members that may have a particular interest in palliative care, they can become our champion nurses, who are then able to go on to different workshops and courses and be that sort of go-to person within the team who holds that knowledge. So it almost gives them that extra responsibility and sort of keeps them in the team a little bit longer. So we have quite a lot of champion roles. So we have them for continence, carers, tissue viability. So I'm hoping with that is enough for some people to actually keep them motivated and interested, and sort of, what's the word, have that appetite for keep learning, but not having to completely move away from the team. What was the second part to your question?
If I may come in there, sorry, Natasha, but also you're on about the recruitment. One of the things that we've done recently is that we have engaged a bit more with Anglia Ruskin about placement of students. So we have coming through. We weren't getting very much management students through, which are in their last 6 months of their training and that. And if we get more of that type of student through, they can see what the district nursing does, and they are actually coming up for recruit or at the time where they will be looking for jobs and get more recruitment. So we are getting some more management students through, which hopefully we can entice into the workforce, shall we say. Other than that, if
I think that's
thing,
great, Brian. Did you want to say your other thing, and then I've got 2 more questions to take, and then
okay, just briefly. Another thing with retention, and the staff do work, but I would say with the bank, they used to get a 15%, if you recall, bank levy, shall we say. That has gone, and staff are a little bit more reluctant now to take on additional hours on the bank, but that's just an aside to be mindful of.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Mike and then Scott, and then we're going to have to move on.
Okay.
You're okay. All right, just Mike then.
Thanks. Hi, Natasha. Good to see you, Brian. Thank you very much
Thank you.
indeed for your presentation. So firstly, as a GP, I can attest to the amazing work that you do in a whole range of specialist intro as well as a general staff. So it's absolutely extraordinary. And the reach, I hadn't appreciated that 40,000, if my maths is correct, that's 4% of our catchment. So, approaching 1 in 20 of our patients are in one way or another touching your services. So my question was really could you just say a word or two about how the district nursing interdigites with a really complex and important area of work, which is palliative care? You mentioned Arthur Rank, but in order for people to die where they want to in their home, they need good care in their home, and you provide that. And I just wondered if, in the interest of time, just a sentence or two, but I'd be keen to know a bit more.
So we're very fortunate to have really good links with the Arthur Rank Hospice and their organisations. So we generally have quite a lot of meetings with them around our complex patients. We've been able to build up those professional relationships with the specialist teams, and that has taken some time, Mike. It's taken years to grow those relationships, but I would definitely say for the Cambridge area, we have some really robust links with the Arthur Rank. So we have a lot of shared care. So we then touch on all the things that you need to try and help that person die where they want to, be symptom free, and have good care. So I think it's very much on communication with those outside organisations and putting a lot of investment on the professional relationships with those organisations.
Excellent. And end of life care is so important. I know there's been lots of discussion about it nationally, about other developments, but enabling people to have support and their families at the time when life is ending is a great gift that you can give. And I think we should say thank you to all of your colleagues for what you do there. We are out of time, and I'm sorry about that. I know we've got 1 or 2 people on with us today who've got very particular interest in what district nursing do, and we'll continue to have that interest. Thank you so much for all that you're doing. And Adrian's question there about what we're doing to integrate, I think is one we should come back to be honest, Adrian. I think it's something that we are mindful of, and we will talk a little bit later about how we've been working better together over the winter to support on winter pressures. So we will come to that later in the meeting. But for now, Natasha and Brian, huge thank you to you. It's fantastic to have you with us.
Thank you.
Take back our thanks to the whole team. Thank you.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, we're going to move on now to the main body of the meeting. And I want to just note that today we've got apologies for absence from Lauren Gable and from Jane Cannon, noting that Mike is online with us today. So Mike, one of our NEDs, you are very welcome. Welcome to all those who are attending by the governors or members of the public. I am just going to ask, as I do every time, if we've got any declarations of interest today, any newly discovered since we last met. In which case we will move along, and then we will go to the minutes of the last meeting. I'm going to, in the first instance, check for accuracy on page 1, page 2, page 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. In which case I'm going to say that their minutes are accurate and can be signed. Are there any matters arising from the minutes that people don't feel are adequately covered through the process of the board today? Right. In which case then we will go to those actions which are remaining open, now down to 2. The first one has the title ICB Reset Specification, which is quite a mouthful. But I think this relates to a package of work which we've been seeking to do with the ICB around actually relating population needs. Well, first of all, understanding better what the population needs are for both mental ill health, community-based health, and actually all aspects of physical health also, and relating those to the services that are actually then provided and to look for gaps or deficits. So this is really system working and system responsibility. I'm not sure it's necessarily framed as an action as we might like it to be, but I'm looking to see, Steve, if there's anything you want to say to that one in terms of how we might capture it either as an action or say that it's going to be more properly covered in other areas of business.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and apologies for being late, colleagues. I think, Chair, you're absolutely right. We should probably move this away from being an action now. It's part of our continued conversation with ICB colleagues and commissioning rounds. I think it's safe to say that the NHS operating guidance and the planning guidance was due out a few days back. It's now scheduled to be released by the end of this week. So there's a lot going on today around some of the issues to do with that. So this is going to be superseded into that conversation. One of the things that is very helpful and something that we shouldn't lose sight of is the ICB's recognition that a lot of CPFT's service specifications have not been evaluated for quite some time, and therefore they may not be either fit for purpose, modern enough to respond to the needs of our population, or indeed, to give a technical use of the phrase, Chair, but capacity rebased to see where the demand is. So as an organisation, we were beholden to trying to do that collectively. We've made a decision as an executive team to continue to pursue that ourselves, because we do have a duty to make sure our service specs are as up to date as possible. What we won't do, Chair, and we're conscious this is a public board, is we won't do our service specification rebate ourselves with a view to going back to commissioners with a series of business cases. We want to go back to commissioners to talk about how integrated care works, how we can improve the service by working in partnership. It goes back to Adrian's point around integration of services with other colleagues. If the operating plan guidance is as we expect it to be, it will all be about more integrated care and more about partnerships. We have a huge role to play in that. So with your agreements and agreements of the board, I think we can close this action.
I would certainly support that, looking around the room. Excellent. Then we've gone sort of from the macro to the very micro action around head to toe. My proposal here again is that this becomes more of a business as usual update to the board. We get regular updates on the charity, and I would suggest we actually close the action and just mainstream it visual. Therefore, we can say that the actions as described here today, we've all agreed in various ways, not losing sight of them, that we can close them. Thank you for that. I haven't been notified of any other business. Caroline, I'm looking to you. No? Okay, so that being the case, we will move on to my chair's report, which I will take as read, but as ever, just want to pull out a few items to draw attention to, and building slightly on two things. First of all, the presentation we've just had from our district nursing team, together with a meeting that Steve and I attended at the ICB on Monday with our system partners, right across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, is that I think it's really important to note that this has been a hard winter so far in terms of pressures on health. We've had a great deal of COVID, respiratory illnesses, some norovirus around. It's the perfect combination of things, which mean that our acute colleagues in particular have had real pressures on their services. So it has been excellent to see the way in which all aspects of CPFT have really leaned in to support on that. And their endeavours and hard work have been noticed by colleagues. It has meant that people have either got out of hospital more quickly or stayed out of hospital in the first place. And that's required system working. It's required thinking less about boundaries and silos and much more about what's the shared endeavour here, which is to do our best by people at the time of highest demand. And I'd want to say an enormous thanks to all of our staff for actually working in that way and for never forgetting the impact that working in that way has for real people in difficult situations. I would also like to know with pleasure the excellent work that our research lead, Dr. Ben Underwood and colleagues have been doing on dementia for a long time, but delighted to see the press coverage that they were receiving for the work that is looking at existing medications and how they might be repurposed to good effect to support in the treatment of dementia. So great for them to have that recognition, and I think it really showcases the research excellence that sits within the Cambridge environment and very much within the CPFT family. So really well done to Ben and colleagues. Steve is going to be talking about the refresh of our trust strategy, and I will leave that to him. But what I would stress is that the strategy is about who we want to be, where we want to be as an organisation, and how best we can serve our population. And so in order for it to be the right strategy, it's going to need lots and lots of engagement. So I'd encourage everybody here and beyond who may be viewing this later, think about how you can lean in to support us in shaping CPFT for the future. We're going to be talking about waiting lists later in the meeting, and it's right that we should do so. Like almost every other trust in England, we are having to deal with demands to see our scarce resources of clinicians at an unprecedented level. And I think we should know, and you will see through some of the waiting list data, that we are beginning to see some very modest declines in waiting lists in some areas. That does not happen easily because demand in every area is going up. It only happens because of the immense hard work and sometimes the imagination that staff are having to deploy to get as many people through as quickly as possible. And I do also want to say, and I would love to see just a rethinking a little bit about the number of people who are waiting nationally and locally for diagnoses and treatment for matters around neurodiversity. So I'm thinking here about autism, ADHD, that a wait for a diagnosis here or a wait for treatment is as impactful for many people and those who care for them as waiting to have a hip replaced or a cataract operation. But they're not categorised as what's called elective care. And elective care, you'll have heard talked a lot about in the press in terms of the focus that's been given to it. I would very dearly like to see these areas given that same designation of elective care and the same level of prioritisation. And I hope very much we will see some changes coming through in those areas because we do need the parity around definitions of health, the way that people can get to both diagnosis and treatment. I want to move towards the end by thanking Karen in her role as Deputy Chair for the great work that she's leading on with governors. Some of you who are joining us today will recognise the time and care that Karen is going into to really helping to shape different and better ways of working together. So thank you, Karen, for that. And indeed, to anybody who might be thinking about how can I make a contribution to the work of CPFT, Rick is here with us today, who leads on membership and recruitment into our governing body. I would love to see more people joining us as members and really using your voice to help shape CPFT. And then the final thing I will say is I had the opportunity to visit with our staff mental health team, who are a team of people who support all of the organisations within our ICB area with support on staff mental health. And they are doing amazing work, really important work in terms of both supporting staff to be at work, but also supporting staff who themselves go through trauma through the nature of the work that they undertake on our behalf. We should never forget that we're asking people to do not only amazing things every day that I talk about a lot, but really difficult things every single day. So the fact that we have what is a very rare service here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough around supporting staff in that way is something we should be proud of, but also thank the staff that work within it for the care and the commitment they show in exercising support. So I am going to stop there and invite Steve to give his executive report.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, colleagues around the table, and good morning, colleagues around the virtual table. The report I can take as read, but if the board will allow, I'd just like to highlight a couple of areas within the report. So I think the first I've already touched on, which is the imminent release of the new operating framework and the new NHS planning guidance that's likely to land between sort of today and the end of the week. This is going to signal a reset of some of the expectations from a new government. I think the Secretary of State for Health is asked to see quite a few of us on Friday, I believe, with a view to what those expectations are. And as you would expect, they are absolutely in tune with what we would want to see for our population. So this is a real sense of moving away from hospital and more towards community. And I think this trust can add a comma at the end of that, if the Secretary of State would ever allow me, which is hospital to community, come to home, and working more in our real communities within people's homes. I think the second area that Secretary of State is really keen to profile is this concept of analog to digital. And I think, again, a comma at the end of that is also the real use of AI, but in a safe environment. And there is a very different way of using AI to help us with our productivity compared to in decision making. So I think this board should be assured that what we will be bringing in the next couple of weeks and month or two is a supercharged digital strategy, because a real sense here of just releasing our ambitions as an organisation to work in the digital space much more, to try and utilise productivity in a way that supports our clinicians, that gives us the ability to cut through a lot of the things that we have to do to free up time clinically so that our colleagues can work better directly at the front line. And then the third is to move from disease to prevention. And one thing that I'm very passionate about, although I think prevention is a very strong word, often it misses out mental health, because it's very difficult to prevent mental health in terms of the traditional 5 a day, etc., etc. But we know as providers, there's a huge amount of correlation between the physical self and the mental self, and therefore utilising support with other agencies such as the voluntary sector, our charitable sector, and our social sector around issues to do with peer support, our lived experience, voice, and some of the areas around our groups in our communities are really important for people who struggle with elements such as loneliness or isolation or sometimes exclusion. To that end, all of that is likely to land within the next sort of 48 hours, and there's a lot of narrative around that happening now as we speak. It's a really important signal for both the new government, but also us as CPFT. So the previous week we launched our new strategy, but we didn't launch a strategy to ask colleagues to agree it. We launched a strategy that said we wanted to co-design this. We wanted to build this from a Gestalt principle. And for those of you, just indulge me for 30 seconds, this is not the traditional SWOT, pest and pestle analyses where you would build on your strengths and weaknesses, you'd write your objectives and so on. this is different. I would like this to be different. The organisation has said to me that they want this to be different. And this is a real sense of what are our hopes, our fears, our expectations? What are our wants? How do we interact with each other? How do we work with each other? And I'm excited to see that Stephen's presenting the behavioural framework later in today's agenda, which is a really good signal for the cultural piece that this trust is about to go through, that will signal this is about our future. This is about what we can do collectively together to improve the services that we offer. The strategy relaunch, and Stephen led out on that and did an excellent job, I would have to say. Didn't get too much of a hard time, which I'm quite disappointed by. But the reality of it is, I think we'll be going through a huge number of sessions trying to ask people those questions. What we need here is our emotional response as an organisation, because quite frankly, Chair, this is what we are. We're an organisation that tunes in, hopefully, to the way people feel, because we know there's evidence from, and I won't quote people, but better culture saves lives. And you can see that in terms of the quality of the intervention and the quality of services. The next area I wanted to pick on, which I think is really important, is our engagement exercises and our governance processes. And part of our review of our organisation, moving into the new organisation that we will be, is just tightening up some of the areas that we know we've got some areas to focus on. And it's really helpful that our CPC colleagues will be utilising some of their expertise to help us with this. We've started a process with our external and internal colleagues, and we've asked our workforce as well where we think we're getting this right and where we can improve. That also, Chair, goes into a different way of working with our governance, and some of you are on the call today. And one of the things that I know we wanted to do was to utilise your experience and give you a stronger voice in helping shape and define some of our decision making and our strategy as we move forward as a trust. I believe that will be put into place in the next couple of months, and will shadow some of those arrangements towards February. Our financial position, Chair, is, as the rest of the NHS, somewhat challenged. However, in the finance report under 4.3, I'll give a quick update in Lauren's absence, but we are progressing well with our recovery plan. And as a result of that, then we have star chambers in place, which is to utilise the skills of our directorates. And we will be starting to use in the new year a different approach to things like our PMO and our QI. So our project management office and quality improvement, to liberate resource, liberate efficiency, but with the guise of this being quality and safety, and efficiency will follow. That's the bit that's really important. I think the final area on my report, Chair, that I'd just like to raise by exception is a very good plug to our nursing colleagues, particularly those. We have 9 colleagues that have just been awarded the Queen's Nurse title. And if I can just find the chief nurse, as she's on the end of the table, this is a massive accolade. And it's one of those things that our nursing colleagues, this is a lifetime achievement for some of our clinicians. And to have 9 people be recognised in this space, I'm not sure whether we are the highest in that space, but if we're not, we're close to it.
Certainly for a trust this size.
Well, in that case, a double accolade in terms of the quality and skills of our nursing team. So all of this will be embraced with Rachel's clinical and nursing strategy, working with Kathy, but I think we're building on a series of significant excellence here, and it is something that we should be proud of. And I think with the board's agreement, we'd like to write to these colleagues to say congratulations. I'm sure that when this offer comes from Buckingham Palace, ours will be slightly less grandiose, but we should still say well done nonetheless. I think in that case, we should be very proud of our colleagues. And I'm happy to take any questions at that point, Chair.
All right, thank you so much. So we've taken my report and Steve's report together. So any questions at all arising from those? Jackie?
Mine's a follow-on, Steve, from your last comment about Queen's nurses qualification. I did look it up and I might be wrong, but there's only 50 in Cambridgeshire, so 9 feels like really exciting. And I was just wondering how, through the 9 that have qualified, what role they play in sharing their journey with other people that have the same ambition, and how we promote that journey and that life experience.
Very good point. So there is a nursing forum in each of the directorates. In fact, the OPAC forum is tomorrow afternoon, and then there's also a special Queen's Nursing forum.
So questions or thoughts arising. Steve?
Yeah, thanks. Steve, you mentioned really welcome the supercharged digital strategy, which is something we've spoken about at BNP last meeting and ones before. I think, and also to note the rollout of electronic prescribing, which I think is a direction of travel indicating what we can achieve. It's really just to welcome it and to say BNP, I think we'll get an update, no doubt, at the meeting in February. But just to say, yeah, really good, something we will get behind.
Yeah, thank you. And if I may, one of the things, just to be really clear, both for accuracy of the minutes, but also as a statement, I think, thank you, Steve, that's really important for us. Trust me, it's also important for our system. So one of the things that we must do is, as this is being developed, we mustn't do this in isolation. So we'll do this with our colleagues, so that if we do look at new technology and we start to embrace different technology, there's an ethics, there's a risk element to this, there's a measured approach to this, but also there are multiple systems in this space that we need to be mindful of doing collectively. So we actually talked about this on Monday with our ICD and our provider colleagues around the table. So I think this is more of a collective strategy, but one that we'll see translate into how we deliver better care inside CPFT. I'll bring the timescale back to the next board.
All right, and just for clarification for those listening in, BNP is our Business and Performance Committee. No, it's fine. It wouldn't be the NHS if it didn't have many acronyms. Mike, do come in and then we must move on.
Yeah, Steve, just perhaps not surprising, as chair of the Quality and Safety Committee, I'm pleased also to hear the emphasis on quality improvement methodology being implemented in the trust, and not only linking it to efficiency, but also linking it to quality and safety of care. So it's just really a point, not a question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's a nice segue, I think, into the board assurance framework, which is next, Steve, which I think you're going to.
Thank you, and thanks, Chair. So the board is appraised of the fact that the board assurance framework, or BAF for short, contains 9 of our key strategic risks. These are risks that we keep on our agenda and we have a regular review of. By definition, Chair, of a board assurance framework, these things are not fluid. So therefore, they're strategic in nature and they are items within the organisation or which would affect the organisation or within our operating landscape. So if you don't see change from month to month, that's because they are more macro in nature rather than the risk register, which is, of course, more fluid. So it's just a point to make. On the first page of the report, Chair, I won't go through this in detail, but there are plans to work and revisit our board assurance framework, in particular after the operating framework from the NHS has landed, because it may be really useful then to reset some of our expectations in the event that some of these things change. So we'll be bringing that back to make sure that we've included that at the next board. I think the other area, Chair, which under item 3 of action against objective 1, which is the risk around stakeholder relationships. Chris, who is with us today, thank you, Chris, is working with our colleagues so that we have a more accurate view of how our stakeholders engage with us. And what I mean by that is not a traditional stakeholder management plan, which is what organisations roughly calls to sort of engage with partners. More of an active engagement with our partners in a sense of how can we co-design things collectively together? How can we mitigate risks at a more macro level together? And it was good to see our Overview and Scrutiny Committee colleagues ask us those questions last week. We welcome those challenges because as an organisation, we should embrace those challenges. But what I was more impressed with by Cambridgeshire's Overview and Scrutiny was the offer of support, Chair. I think that was excellent because they did offer a sense of we can't do this together separately, we need to do this together. And given the view that a lot of our services directly impact on things such as housing, our social environments that we operate in, education, employment, etc., we most definitely can't do that as a provider in isolation. The other area that I wish to highlight to the board, which has been a marginal change since the last board assurance framework against the quality review that is contained in the following risk, which is under effective patient care, is that I've spoken to our Chief Operating Officer, Holly, and spoken to our Head of PMO, which we are strengthening with a real sense of these items being backed up by an effective project management, program management approach, and most definitely being identified as business critical issues for the organisation. So it's a clumsy way of me saying, Chair, that the BAF will present a highlight overview, but underpinning that there will be a series of programmes that will look towards mitigating some of these issues. Again, they'll be brought through the formal committees of the board, so for assurance.
That's super. Before I take any questions on this, just again, for those joining us, when you refer to oversight and scrutiny committees, these are local government structures, and the one that you were attending was the county council one, which again, we were pleased that you were able to be there. So any questions from the board on this? Which is as described by Steve. No, I mean, I think we are going to see this possibly change in nature due to more national macro direction on operating priorities, but it is right and proper that we treat it with all due seriousness, which we do. Okay, in which case, deriving from some of what you've talked about, we then should move on to receive our first board report on the high performing organisation programme report. We've got Tom joining us, who I can see, who is leading on that. We're going to ask Steve to introduce what's called within the organisation as HPOP, I think.
We couldn't think of a better name, I'm afraid. The High Performing Organisation Programme. Yeah, we do love a good acronym. But HPOP sounds like some version of a pop group, but we'll see when we get there. I'm not going to steal Tom's thunder, Chair, but what I am going to say is, as part of our organisation's pause and reset, as a new chief executive, it's really helpful for me to be able to spend a couple of months talking to people, spend a couple of months lifting stones and opening cupboards and having a chat with people and basically going and engaging with our workforce. During that process, what's been incredibly helpful for me is being able to get a real sense of some of the things that we'd like to improve. And so we've had a couple of support offers from agencies that we'll hear about later this afternoon, but also we've been able to embrace that with a real sense of learning, a real sense of transparency, and a real sense of wanting to understand our baseline in order for us to effectively move forward. We initiated the HPOP programme about 6 to 7 weeks ago as a result of us wanting to structure where we were looking to bolster our foundations as an organisation. And those are against 8 key areas, the one of which Tom is going to talk a little bit about is around good governance. The other area is quality and safety. Another is people, culture and organisational development. Another is our strategic planning, business development and performance approach. Another is digital transformation, which we've touched upon. Good communications, both internally within our organisations, infrastructure and externally, and engagement in that space is really important. Research and innovation and co-production and lived experience to inform our strategy is essential as an underpinning factor. So those 8 key areas will inform the strategy I talked about, but our HPOP programme is primarily focused on, Tom, probably the best way to describe this is taking our organisation to a view of it being an outstandingly run organisation, something that we want to see all of our policies, procedures and everything line up to be effective and make the organisation a really solid place to work. So Tom, can I hand over to you, good self?
Most certainly. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Chair, and for allowing me to come speak to you all today. Building upon what Steve was just mentioning there about being an outstanding, outstandingly run organisation, when I've been talking to wider staff and delivering sort of the brief as well about what HPOP is, what it means to them and what it hopes to achieve, I think it's also worth reflecting that this seems to be a really welcomed approach by the staff that we've engaged with so far, which is reassuring. And also it makes it a privilege to be involved with this piece of work. And I'm pleased to be able to come and present to the board today the first sort of progress update of exactly where we are. So for those who are unaware, the High Performing Organisation Programme is effectively a 12-month piece of work which may have potential to increase or decrease depending on the need of the organisation. But over that 12-month period, it's broken down into 3 phases. And we're currently deep within phase 1. And phase one effectively seeks to underpin all of the fundamentals that are important to any organisation, but particularly one that has aspirations to indeed be as high performing as we know that we can be, and we owe it to our staff and to the people that we serve, our patients and service users. In terms of phase one specifically then, Chair, I don't propose to go through the paper in detail, but just draw everyone's attention in particular to paragraph 3 within my paper, which is about the progress update. Now, within phase one, there were 56 individual actions. I don't propose we go through them in any detail whatsoever, but just to report that of those 56, 31 of them are complete and closed down or pending minor finalisation, right at the final stages. So significant amount of work has gone into getting us over halfway through some of the actions and only being about halfway through in terms of time as well allocated to phase one. A further 20 of the 56 remain on track. So combined with the actions completed, that's 51 of 56 are either on track, complete, or due to be completed with minor finalisation. There is one action that is going to see some slight delay, and we're working with the executive owner in developing that further, and also seeking to utilise the support that's become available to the organisation through an external support agency to help us look at what was once coined the Trust-Wide Improvement Board and see what the future of that looks like for the organisation and how it can best serve our staff and indeed where we want to go as a trust. And then just the last point probably to note for those who've been keeping score to get us to 56, that leaves 4 actions. Now, those 4 actions continue to be part of the high performing organisation programme, but due to the complexity of the work and the significant importance of ensuring we really put everything we can into ensuring it achieves what we need it to, there is a proposal that this is going to be moved across to phases 2 and 3. As an example of what those pieces of work are, this is around the trust strategy that's already been nodded to earlier on in this meeting, and indeed the really important move forward with things like the clinical strategy alongside the nursing strategies as well. So they rightly deserve more time than phase one would initially permit. But what I am pleased to report is we're not just kicking the can down the road. There is some significant work being established in this space in trying to establish and setting the conditions for us to continue this work going forward. And then finally, just to report there are no actions of concern of the 56 that are contained within phase one. Chair, thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Tom. Great to get report on such good progress, and I know that that's not happening without a great deal of hard work and commitment from you and indeed from others, and reassuring to hear how well it's landing with staff. Any questions or observations from colleagues? Ed?
Yes, thanks very much, Tom and Steve. I mean, I think we all welcome this important programme, and clearly it is to some extent top-down driven. But Steve was saying earlier about the importance of co-production, and I just wonder if you could speak to that aspect of things. How is this process being run in a way which would be recognised as any member of CPFT staff would feel they've got a stake in it, they are co-producing it, it's not something that's just
No, absolutely. Thank you for raising that, because co-production must be the fundamental of what a fundamental attribute of what the plan is built upon. And phase one, because we have wanted to move in a deliberate manner, phase one is broadly built upon the recommendations that external review have provided us. Phases 2 and 3, at the heart of that is co-production. And in the background of whilst we've been delivering the 56 actions of phase one, myself, Jim, and others have been getting out and about in the organisation, really sharing what the aspiration is of the high performing organisation programme, seeking feedback, but also now starting to embed some key milestones in which that co-production is going to occur. So staff in particular are going to be really important to that, but also the recognition of how we interface with our wider system partners, how we can continue to be the best team player within the system as well. And then, of course, not forgetting voices of carer representation, representative groups, for example, and of course support from the volunteer sector as well, and ensuring that we understand how we can best support each other achieve the ultimate aim, which is the same, and is to be here for our patients. Although HPOP seeks to look at good governance as its primary focus, we recognise the importance that it will have to the other 8 domains that Steve outlined earlier, and we can only do that by bringing the team along the journey with us.
Thank you.
Bring in Scott.
Just to emphasise some of the practical examples to answer your question. So, as Tom rightly said, the programme itself is building on other work that we're doing, engaging with colleagues, piece of which is the well-led review that Grant Thornton has undertaken. So they engage directly with individuals, groups of individuals, and focus groups, questionnaires, surveys, that kind of insight that's then factoring through. But also credit to Tom and Jim Ledbetter that Tom referred to, actually spending time with the director teams as well. And I haven't had a chance to catch up with Tom, but I think the children's directorate, again, thinking about not just the well-led component of the governance lens, but also how do we then, in terms of CQC, making sure that we're also respecting all of the key lines of inquiry that's part of their assessment process as well. So we're getting a lot of good intelligence and a lot of good engagement with colleagues. We also ran a quite significant session at the Trust Leadership Team meeting that was held last week, and again, looking for people to contribute. So it is very much a kind of open opportunity, an open invitation to get colleagues to help us define what we mean by an outstanding organisation.
I'm going to bring in Steve, and then I might indulge myself with a question, and then I think we'll move on.
Thank you, Chair. I should let you go first. I think the other thing that was signalled at the beginning of last week, Ed, was Chris had created the first Online with Steve, which is a very snappy title, which was an interesting experience in its own right. Which, yeah, it doesn't sound. It was more exciting than it sounds. I promise. But this was the first opportunity because we said that over the last couple of months, in January, we would start signalling to the organisation around our direction of travel, our improvement agenda, where we wanted to go, our vision, and all of the things that are really important to us. And the first sort of it was open to all staff, Chris. The first online session was really helpful, actually, just to land some of that ambition, to talk about the offer of collectively working together, but also help, as Scott has said, to try and explain that some of the things that we're doing is tightening some of our processes and procedures, making sure that they are as effective and as efficient as possible. A great example of this are things like the difference, and Stephen can jump in here, please, but the difference between compliance against appraisals and our appraisal rates, and whether our appraisals are as effective as they can be. So we have that initial stage of being a compliance organisation and then being a very effective one, and making sure that they're more conversations than they are quite transactional relationships. I will say that Chris also put me on the spot while I've got the microphone with asking me a variety of quite personal questions. One of which was, do I prefer cats and dogs? Forcing me into an answer which alienated 50% of the workforce. So I think, thank you for that, Chris. But feedback in that space is very good, and we'll continue to do that, Ed, certainly from myself and the executive. We're going to be a lot more visible with the organisation, talking about listening to what they want to see in the future, and we'll link that into our strategy work, which is essential. And also, and I'll put a mantle down now to look at Stephen and my colleagues, we will also be able, and I will expect us to demonstrate to you where we've co-produced and how much at what level. So not just some reassurance that we've gone out and said, what do you think? I'd like to see a detailed breakdown of that. So, and Stephen's on to that.
All right, indulge one moment.
Sorry, Chair. I mean, look, Ed, I think your question was really, really good one in the context. So we've got to continue to challenge ourselves. You know, the HPOP thing, you know, very positive. We're hearing some really good feedback. But actually, you know, if I'm a pharmacist at the Cavell, I'm a district nurse, I'm a, you know, healthcare assistant, how are you talking to me? One of the bits of feedback we got when we started doing that strategy session, we've done a couple of those engagement sessions around the strategy. We said, look, how do you want us to engage? We don't come in with a preconceived set of ideas. And they said, you know what, we need you to be out. We need you to come and visit us. You need to use the directorate line management, but you actually need to be in front. We want to talk to you, we want to see you. And we want you to use to every type of sort of communications you can in the context of that engagement. And I think they want a voice, they want to be enabled, they want us to, as an organisation, to hear, and it is about that heart and mind. So I know it's a bit of an odd adage, but it is very much around that heart and mind. They want to be empowered. That's my claim.
That's super helpful, actually. It sort of goes almost to the heart of the question I was going to ask, but I'll ask it in a slightly different way. Tom, when you and Jim have been out and meeting staff, having conversations about what you're doing, are you getting any feedback from colleagues about things where they feel there are bits missing or things they would like to see?
Very much so, Chair. Thank you. So I think the initial reaction is we've heard about HPOP. We'd like to now understand a little bit more about what it means to us on the ground, but also really reassuringly, it's how can we help deliver some of the effect that we aspire to achieve over the next 12 months. There have been some very specific examples around some of the desires to want to feed into various strategies, and also how we engage with the staff as well. Stephen touched on it as well about the mechanism of how do they feed in. So I'll take a step back. How do we communicate to them, but equally how do they feed into the programme? And of course, what's been really useful is to be able to have boots on the ground, being able to go and physically see people, but also provide opportunities for follow-up. So it's not just been here's a mandate that we're now going to be delivering and everyone needs to get on board. It's absolutely not been that. It's this is the end point of where we would like to be. Can we now seek to work together to get to that? Even if it's quite a meandering journey, it needs to have deliverables along that way to make sure that everyone has had opportunity to feed in. And I genuinely feel that we're at the start of that journey. It would be it wouldn't be entirely truthful if I said everyone is aware of HPOP and where we've been, because we're only 7 weeks into the delivery of the programme. But the more opportunities we've had to engage with staff, I believe that there is opportunity for them to engage and to offer up suggestions. And most of phase 3, which is in draft currently, is already being filled directly from suggestions from the workforce.
Brilliant. As you know, I am an immense believer in the importance of conversations with staff and shared endeavours. So that's really heartening to hear. Tom, let me end where I began by saying an enormous thank you to you for all the hard work you've been doing, and indeed to others around this endeavour. It's not a huge team, but an immense task. So thank you very much for that. We must move on, and I think I have lost my agenda momentarily. We are going to matters relating to business and performance. Those of you at the last meeting will recall that because we were hugely time pressured last time, business and performance, which normally comes underneath matters of quality and safety and people, we said we would bring up the agenda in order that it got its moment in the sun, so to speak. To this effect, then, I'm going to go to Steve with a report from the Business and Performance Committee.
Thank you, Chair. This is a report from the Business and Performance Committee that was held on December the 11th. So please take the report as read. There's a number of points and matters in here that will have been updated in the agenda pack for today, but I'll touch on some key points I'd like to highlight from that meeting. First was on finance, and the Chief Exec's already covered this to some extent, but we did hear about the financial recovery plan in some detail in December, and the challenges of the out-of-area costs and the shortfall in meeting efficiency targets, which there's been a lot of work on since this meeting. And we also noted at the meeting the really positive progress that the Star Chambers were making in getting to grips with the efficiencies and other opportunities. And I think at the time of the meeting, the Star Chambers were in progress. We also heard about the very positive discussions with ICS partners to work towards a forecast break-even outturn for 24-25 at this meeting, which was subsequently referred on to the board. There's an item on finance to follow, so I won't dwell any further on that. Just briefly on the Children's Hospital, it's elsewhere on this agenda, the seeking board approval to set up a subcommittee and to agree the terms of reference, which will mean that the committee will report into the board, not into B&P, into business and performance going forward. But I just wanted to make the important point that I'm sure there will be matters and issues that that committee on the Children's Hospital will be asking subcommittees to consider as we go forward through the full business case process over the next 12 to 15 months. On the operational performance report, again, it's on the agenda, but at the meeting in December, we noted the improvements on delayed discharges, but more to do, notably with local authorities on the housing provision. And it's great to hear the engagement that's taking place with local authority partners, which will set the platform, I'm sure, for that to be positive progress for us. We welcome the great news on the Norbury 3 reopening, which was reopened earlier in the autumn, which was great. And we also noted the challenges which we've touched on, and I'm sure will be touched on shortly, with ADHD and autism waiting lists, which will be covered, I'm sure, shortly. The final point just to flag and highlight was on digital transformation, but we've touched on that. But there was some concern about attendance in the digital transformation board. We were reassured steps were being taken to address that, which I'm sure they have been and will be looking to be assured, as we like to put it, at the V&P meeting in February. That's actually taking place, which I'm sure it will. And I think even more so, given the profile and importance of digital transformation, as has been said already this morning. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Obviously, a very busy committee for you, with many items of importance covered. I'm just going to see if there's any questions or thoughts that people have coming out of that. Obviously, it's in the subcommittee that the real heavy lifting happens. I was just going again to ask a question, which is, we have these things across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough called accountable business units, and we are the home for the mental health, learning disability and autism accountable business unit. I know that there was a planning workshop happening this month, so it'd just be good to get a flavour of progress on these entities, which I meant to give some ownership and focus across the system. And I'm quite keen that we remember we are part of a wider system. Thank you, Stephen. Looking at you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So just to remind everybody, you've got technically there are 5 accountable business units. They're now really called partnerships. You've got North Place Partnership, South Place Partnership. You've got the Mental Health, Learning Disabilities and Autism Partnership, ABU. You've got Children's and Maternity, ABU, and then actually there is a Strategic Commissioning Partnership, which actually sits within the ICB. If we just bring it down to sort of north and south, first of all, we have a significant input and support into those. Certainly Holly and I sit on those respective boards. We feed into sort of the CPFT into the work that they're currently doing. And that's very much based on sort of neighbourhood. And then if we align that to the development of the new models of care, they are quite central to that development going forwards. And again, there's some initial work around that that's just started. And we could begin to talk about sort of some of the hubs, etc., that's is going to be developed. And then if we bring it further down to the mental health, learning disability and autism ABU, I think it's fair to say we've had a change in the executive SRO, and we've had a change in the key officer. And we had our planning workshop yesterday where we started to think about the various 30-odd schemes that we're currently involved in and supporting, actually distilling those down to about 6 to 7 that we can actually support, deliver in greater focus, and make sure that we're helping the system come together in an integrated way. One of those basically, for example, is going to be around supporting the work around the Learning Disability Partnership. and the work there. And we know there's some challenges there going forward, things potentially more care around learning disabilities. And then another one potentially would be around rehabilitation, and that's mental health rehabilitation, and looking at designing a whole new pathway around mental health. And that's based on some work done by Dr. Catherine Maxey. And again, we're going to try and help move that forward in 25-26. We'll continue to report up to business and performance. And I think it'd be really good if the board had a bit more sight and overview of that work going forwards as well.
That's super helpful, Stephen. I'm delighted to hear about more focus being deployed, because when everything's a priority, potentially very few things are. So I think it'd be great if we could bring on the ABU to a public board meeting to actually talk about the work happening there. Did you want to come in, Ian?
Yeah, just briefly, Steve, I just wanted to amplify that one of the very positive things that we talked about at the Business Performance Committee was the quite dramatic improvement in the out area placement.
As fast as going to go in. Yeah.
And we saw data up until November 24, didn't we? I was just wondering, do we have more up-to-date data? Is that sustained?
As of yesterday,
Stealing my thunder. Yeah, so we're down to one inappropriate. We had a period of a week where we had none. So we've got one inappropriate and 4 appropriate. So inappropriate is where we do have the bed stock. So ideally the patient should be within our own bed stock. Appropriate is that bed stock that we don't have. So things like female psychiatric intensive care units or locked rehab. So some great work. The team have continued to really sort of push that. I guess I want to say our work isn't over. So I think, you know, it is early days. We've sustained single figures for nearly 2 months now. But actually we need to sustain that very low sort of, I've been looking at between 0 and 2 for inappropriate. And then I think we need to really focus on the appropriate, because actually we need to be making sure that those lengths of stay are as short as possible, and we're trying to bring those patients back to their locality with their community teams.
If I may, the significance of the BNP was clearly about the cost implications of having so many patients. Let's not forget, this is fantastic from a quality of care perspective as well. And all credit to the folks for the impact they've had in making sure that we've got the right model there for those patients.
No, it is fantastic. I couldn't possibly let the moment go by because it is one of my topics of great interest, and which is Holly has referred to appropriate out of area being patients who are most seriously mentally well. And that happens because we have in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. Now, bearing in mind that the last time I looked, there were plenty of women in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. We have no funded beds for psychiatric intensive care for women in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and that has got to change. It really has. So I will say no more.
Let's take a very quick tangent, if I may.
I have to be very quick.
Well, Mike Nampton and I went to a service visit at George Mackenzie House during the week. And one of the insights that afforded us was the fact that we've got the mental health collaborative across the east of England, where patients are being accommodated and supported across the east of England. Those are not treated as out of area. They fall within the scope of the private collaborative. Some of the patients that we're talking about here, they are. Well, as well as the ABU issue, I think we also need to be thoughtful about what else should we be looking to try and promote through the provider collaborative that takes more of a regional sense of responsibility. Because some of these patients, you know, with all due respect to the quality of care that we need to afford them, are very, very expensive as well. So there's a lot to be said for finding more, you know, egalitarian on supporting patients.
All right. Well, all of which I will summarise as saying the NHS is a very complex entity, and in complexity, we don't always care as well for people as we might want to. I'm going to move on with thanks to Steve and to those who question here to Holly, who's had a little bit of a thunder stolen, but not thunder stolen, but amplified possibly, Holly. So over to you.
Lovely, thank you, and I'll be brief. So highlights and areas to note. So obviously the highlight is around our patient flow. And I guess the opening of Mulberry 3 that allowed us to look again at our 3-3-3 model, which actually means that we're progressing patients, which again is helpful. So that work continues. And we must press on alongside that. I'm really keen that it's taken a lot of hard work to get here. It will continue to be hard work to maintain that position. So we need to think internally about how do we really embed a sustainable approach to patient flow. And the teams are really engaged in that. So we had our first quarterly patient flow away day where we looked at what we wanted to achieve. We've got our next one next week, looking at what is our 12-month strategy for patient flow going to be. So we look forward to taking that back through BNP. I do want to mention waiting lists, and as Steve has mentioned, we did go to Health Scrutiny Board last week. Was quite rightly, they were very interested in our waiting list position, and our waiting list position is a tale of two halves. So in our generic mental health services, both for children and for adults, we're seeing some, again, sustainable improvements in reducing our waiting times. And again, huge thanks to the teams that have supported the changes that have enabled that to happen. However, we do have really significant challenges with our ADHD, autism, and our neurodiverse pathways across both adults and children. That's a national trend. However, we need to look locally about what we can do to try and manage and mitigate that. So there is a piece of work looking at the children's pathway to try and sort of not segregate ADHD and autism, but to look at a more needs-led approach. In terms of adults, we're actually taking a paper to the ICB, where we're going to pose the ICB some quite challenging questions around actually what do we think the future of adult ADHD and autism needs to look like, and then what commitment are we going to get in terms of resources to be able to fund that. So we'll be providing some scenarios and thoughts, but we are really well aware that our ADHD and autism waiting list, particularly for adults, is really challenging, and that that position is worsened by the ongoing international issue with medications. So actually, there's still significant issue with ADHD medication. So again, wanting to think about actually how could we support people that normally we would be commencing on medication, but can't because of shortages, and how are we going to support those? And actually, we've had, again, some discussions with North and South around actually could they support with any of our sort of waiting well initiatives in localities. And the other area that I do want to mention around waiting lists is regarding our physical health therapy-led waiting lists. And again, that is across both adults and children's. So we know that therapists are a really finite resource. And so purely therapy-led waiting lists, we're seeing an increase in demand and an increase in time people are waiting. So again, looking at, are there alternative workforces that we could be using to support those teams? Actually, looking particularly in children's at combining some of our therapy teams so that we can think about actually having a more flexible approach rather than having a sort of traditional physio, speech and language, etc., but looking at a more multidisciplinary team approach. But again, we're aware that some of those waiting lists are creeping up to a level that we feel uncomfortable with. So that's I'm happy to take them.
Okay, Thank you, Rachel. And when you're talking about physical therapy, therapies, it's things like speech and language therapy.
Yes.
Those particularly long waits.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, any questions or observations? Steve?
Thank you. Thanks, Holly. Just a question on the geographical spread. I noticed on the ADHD and autism children's waiting list that it's quite a bit notably higher in the north of the county than south. I just wondered if you could comment on that.
Yes, and again, that's part of the work that is being looked at as part of the system. So we do have an inequity in our offer. So actually our commissioning arrangements are slightly different between north and south, and actually that is one of the things that we want this new pathway to address. So it isn't a difference in terms of, I suppose, demand, but it is a difference in how currently we provide the service, and that is around our commissioning arrangements, but wanting to say actually within our system, we want everyone to have equal equity.
When we talk about commissioning arrangements, we're talking about how we get paid, to do things. I mean, I think we need to be quite plain in our speech about what we're talking about here, about the amount of resource that goes in, what people are actually buying. Steve?
Sorry, just to add to that, Steve, I think what's been really helpful over the last certainly couple of weeks, Holly, is our relationship with Cambridge Community Services and the conversation that we've been having with both our ICB colleagues, our Integrated Care Board colleagues, some of our additional partners, and CCS as they're called, with a view to understanding that this isn't just bespoke to the local area, this is more wider than this. So there's a lot of work that's going on now, clinically led, which is fantastic, around looking at, again, this word service specification keeps coming up at this point, but how we do things and what we are paid to do, I think is the two ways of describing this, but it's worthy for assurance to note that we're not doing this in isolation, we're doing this again with our partners.
Ed?
Thanks very much, Holly. This is a slight deep dive into one particular bit of detail, but on the slide, page 74 of the pack, we're looking at ADHD waiting list by locality. In the south, it says 49% requiring private diagnosis gratification. Can you just unpack that for us a little bit? What does that mean?
Yes, so that's quite an interesting discussion that is ongoing. So obviously people who are waiting a long time have the option to go privately to a private provider to be assessed and receive their diagnosis. What we are now finding is that people are coming to us to say that they've had a diagnosis, they require medication, but actually when we've looked into the assessment they've had, it doesn't meet our clinical standards in terms of the assessment that they would have if they were on our pathway. And obviously clinicians feel quite uncomfortable prescribing medication based on an assessment that's been done by other people, not necessarily done by psychiatrists, and certainly not following, I suppose, the robust processes that we would. So we're having conversations again with ICB colleagues around what does that process look like in terms of ratifying some of those assessments, because obviously if clinicians are prescribing on the basis of an assessment they didn't do, they are still accountable obviously for their prescription. So it's a real clinical governance issue. And it's in the last sort of 12 to 18 months that we've seen a huge increase in the number of people who understandably are trying to get clinical assessments by going through private providers.
I mean, it may be a slightly random question, but on the university side of my life, I mean, it's astonishing to see the surge of students that are declaring some kind of ADHD or related issue. And often we struggle within the university for exactly the same reason that you just said, which is they've got a private diagnosis and people look at it and we're not quite sure really how robust it is. And I just wonder, have you spoken to universities, colleges around the place to see, is there anything that, could they possibly provide a kind of alternative income stream?
No, that's a very
in terms of us supporting a more robust approach to diagnosis of people. I think that would probably be very welcome on the university side.
No, we can do that.
I mean, I think it is worth saying that we're doing a great deal of work with our two universities to support on the expansion of support for mental health
Yes.
services. I think, Holly, you and I would recognise that in terms of particularly ADHD diagnoses, some of our psychologists, psychiatrists would say there's some really excellent private providers who are thorough, diligent, do a good job. There are also, and this is a national to international problem, there are people who are getting diagnoses from algorithms on computers, which are typically giving an 85 to 90% positive in terms of you've got a name for something. And that is really not helpful. So we understand completely that if you're a parent or somebody who's experiencing difficulty, that you will want to get a diagnosis as quickly as possible. And we're not saying that some private provision isn't good, but please be wary of algorithms that are giving, in many cases, false positives, false concern, and false expectations in many ways. Holly, could I ask you about something in the report which is very important to everyone on the board, and that's about the PCREF data that we have, PCREF being Patient Care and Race Equality Framework, which gives us data broken down against ethnicity for the types of intervention that can happen around mental health services. And it really does behove us, as everybody nationally should be, about the disproportionate levels of impact that derive for people who are not of white heritage. I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about what we are trying to do and to learn and to improve.
Yes, indeed. So we briefly brought it to the last BMP in terms of CPFT is the anti-racism framework, the mandated national framework, but I think we ought to realise it's also the right thing to do for our patients. So we've been working on a dashboard. The completed dashboard will be presented at the next BMP, and it enables us to look at all of the interventions that we do with our mental health patients, and will show us where we've got differences, predominantly based around race. We've had an initial meeting with all of our directorates, so our directorate colleagues, to share the dashboard. And what we've asked them to do is to go and identify their top 3 discrepancies and to come back with an action plan around that. But also to have broader discussions amongst their teams around, actually, do we recognise the data, what elements of it come as a surprise to us, but also do we understand what's sitting behind that data? So do we understand why, for example, we might be doing restrictive practices on those who are black more than we are with people who are white? So we need to do some deep dives. So we're quite early on in our journey for PCREF, but we've got a lot of engagement and interest in it. And as I say, we look forward to sharing through BMP the next stages.
Okay. Well, we have, as a board, had some presentations on this patient care and race equality framework. We've all committed to wanting to use what it tells us to improve our practice. So I would like us to come back within a period of 2 or 3 board meetings time to actually say how is that working, Scott, and then we must look
I
at
think the expectation would be bringing something back to the board sooner rather than later, simply because you pick up on other facets of the equality and diversity agenda. But the EDI strategy is nearing completion, and it's going round for final engagement with colleagues across the organisation. And obviously, the PCREF indicators will be a very core part of that. So the team will be able to bring that back probably at the March meeting.
I think that's important, but I don't want PCREF focused on
absolutely.
patients and how they experience care to get not lost, but slightly compartmentalised there. So I think good if we can do both, actually. I'm going to ask her to move on then to the finance report, which Steve, in Lauren's absence, you're going to provide.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for noting Laura's apologies. She's not well, so I will try my best to step into the Chief Financial Officer space, but I'm conscious that there are people around this table that can also support me if needs be. I think the first thing to note is that, Steve, this has already gone through committee of the board, so the board's committees are fully cited on both the recovery plan, financial position at month 9, and also the mitigating actions against that. If I can draw colleagues' attention to the bottom of the first page of the report. So it talks about at the end of December. So we need to be mindful that our report as it currently stands is running up to the 31st of December because of the way in which we report, which is often known as month 9 for the organisation. You will also recall that the board discussed a financial recovery/efficiency plan for probably some time. And you may also recall that back in October, certainly when I started in role, one of the things that I was really keen to see, and my exec colleagues were very supportive and equally keen to see, was a real sense of a 5-year strategy, a 2-year delivery plan, and a 6-month recovery plan. The 6-month recovery plan is where HPOP steps in. It's where our financial efficiency starts. It's, Steve, you made reference to Star Chambers, and for colleagues that please don't Google Star Chambers because they relate back to the Spanish Inquisition. They were not as bad as that. However, what they were was a real sense of understanding, actually, if there are financial efficiencies that need to be made for us to recover our financial position, then we need to give those instructions in a way that allow our workforce to tell us where they're going to come from, rather than us try to implement them in a centralist kind of way. And the reason for doing that, and Chair, this is really important to note, and hopefully both the Chief Operating Officer, Chief Nurse and Chief Medical Officer can support me as well as my other colleagues, is that that is not to the detriment of dilution of quality or the safety of the services that we provide. Therefore, what we needed to do was to change the way in which we were trying to look at the ownership associated with efficiency. So Star Chambers were created with a view to asking our directorates and our corporate services to identify where their efficiencies were, what sat underneath them, what the impact of those were, and whether or not there were other opportunities, if they were given the freedom to do them, would they achieve that. Those Star Chambers in all of our clinical facing services have been completed. There are a couple left to do with our corporate services, which is going to dovetail into the work that Scott's mentioned before with a colleague, an organisation called Attain, which we'll pick up later on. So within that 6 months, Chair, there was also a view of financial recovery being somewhat, the phrase is back-ended, and what that means is towards the latter part of the financial year, because plans need to be implemented in order to receive and achieve those efficiencies, some of which we've talked about today, including our out-of-county provision, etc., etc. So the financial efficiency plan does talk about our delivery of £9.606 million to date, which is a significant amount of money that we've been able to deliver in terms of efficiencies. However, if we look at that as a paper exercise, that's 3.55 million behind the plan, which is the risk moving forward. Since the Star Chambers and the initiation of the financial recovery plan, our month 9 position had improved considerably, with the view as being 1.2 million surplus in month, which is contributing now to our financial return. So the organisation, working with our ICB partners and our clinical colleagues, is forecasting and aiming for break even at the end of the year. I'm just going to pause there, Chair, because I'd like, Steve, if you don't mind, from a E&P perspective, just to support me with this, or challenge, of course. This has been a considerable amount of heavy lifting over the last couple of months, and a very big thank you to our clinical directorate leads and our corporate colleagues for creating efficiencies and being very creative in that space. We are going to need to continue to do this. As we get into austerity, what we need to be able to do is to make ourselves as efficient as possible, because at the end of the day, we're custodians of public money, but to reinvest that where we need it most. And what we've also done, as well as being 1.2 million in surplus, we've also been able to liberate some barriers that we've had around some key appointments, particularly in the medical directorate, around our quality and safety, strengthening that by reinvesting. So the 1.2 million is net of that. So, Steve, from a non-executive perspective, can I just give the microphone to you yourself?
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. And I think what you've described demonstrates real progress even since December. And the really important point, I think, is the 1.2 million in-month surplus, while also delivering on the biggest priority of patient care and improving performance, is to be really welcomed. We just to say, BNP have done a lot of work on this. We had an extraordinary meeting of the committee in the late autumn, as well as the scheduled meeting, to get into the detail and understand the steps that were being taken, and it's really good to see the progress that's being made. Of course, we'll see, hopefully we may see month 10, I don't know if we will, the February BNP, which is in 3 weeks' time. So I'm looking forward to seeing that progress continue. Thank you.
Okay, so we know progress, we know that there's been a great deal of scrutiny of this. We note that, however optimistic we are about landing in financial balance this year, that every year is going to be hard. That is the reality of trying to meet demand with finite resources. We will continue to do our very, very best on that. So, Steve, we then have the Emergency Preparedness, Resilience and Response Framework report, which is for noting. But is there anything you particularly want to say around that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And this is by exception. So there are 58 relevant compliance standards that we have in place. We are compliant against all 58, but partially compliant against 2. And so fully compliant against 56. The 2 areas of partial compliance, which is not a risk but needs to be addressed, are contained on the back of the report. Core standard reference 29, which is decision logging. So that is undertaking training at the moment. That will also be embedded within our new committee clerk structure that we're implementing. And so that's part of our new process. So we had to pause with that. So that will be included in that. The second is core standard reference 17, which is called lockdown, which strikes the fear into the heart of many. But the idea there is when a ward needs to lock itself down for safety reasons, this has been done carefully and considered with our wards and departments, because some of our clients in our care have different needs. So what we can't do, Chair, is implement a universal standard across them. We have to do that with our wards and departments. There are core standards that are universal, but the tailoring of this is essential. So these will be picked up with a matter of a course of action within the next couple of weeks, and we'll be able to bring a fully compliant report probably to the next board chair or through Health and Safety Committee.
Yeah, if that could be signed off through the relevant committee structure, that would be great. It's good to see the progress, but the 2 that you note are important, and I'm satisfied that you're dealing with those with all due seriousness.
And Chair, if I may, I've got to take an urgent
No, I'm aware of that.
call, so apologies, colleagues. I'll be back in a couple of minutes.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We're going to move on then to policy and safety. And Mike, looking to you.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm Chair of the Quality, Safety and Patient Experience and Carer Experience. It's a bit of a mouthful, but I think it's important to remember that those are the 3 big areas that we cover. You have a short report in front of you. I'd just like to acknowledge thanks to Kathy Walsh, the Medical Director, and Rachel Gom, Director of Nursing, for their support to me in chairing that committee. In terms of some of the things we've talked about, but I do want to highlight a number of developments which are, I would say, progress and successes. One is the opening of the Beacon Eating Disorder Service, a replacement of the Phoenix Centre, which was closed some time ago. We've talked about the Mulberry Ward opening and the reduction in out-of-area treatments. Whilst this is talked about from an operational and financial point of view, the Health Service Investigation Board produced a report recently which also set out the rather stark safety and quality issues of having patients placed out of area, and we're cognizant of that at the Quality Committee. And as you've already raised, Chair, there's a significant inequity in that men get in-area treatment for paediatric intensive care, but women in Cambridge and Peterborough don't.
Well, I just say, I think we probably mean psychiatric intensive care, not paediatric.
Oh, did I say psychiatric? I do beg your pardon.
Both paediatric and psychiatric need in county, just to be clear.
Chair, thank you very much. Good progress on the Right Care, Right Place programme. Currently on phase 3, looking at section 136 placements. Appointment of a falls and education training lead to help with physical health, and the establishment of a violence, aggression, aggressive practice reduction group, which looks at restrictive practices and also protection of staff, visitors and patients from violence and aggression. So there are a significant number, and that isn't a comprehensive list of things that have progressed. In terms of waiting lists, we do look at those, and thank you to Holly, the Chief Operating Officer, for outlining where waits are long. In addition to reducing the waiting lists, and there have been some reductions, we do consider, for those significant numbers of people who are waiting for a significant length of time, harm reduction, waiting well, the use of colleagues and partners in the voluntary sector, and developing new models of care in terms of needs-based approaches to these patients. And just to emphasise, it's both neurodiversity and physical health, as Holly has already set out. With regards to the patient and carer race equality framework, which we've already talked about, it is a mandated framework. We looked at that data too, as well as the Business and Performance Committee. And of the 3 key areas within it, I think governance arrangements are well established. We are looking at data, as Holly has said, and in addition to her comments, one of the issues is that some of the data sets contain small numbers of patients, which means that the confidence limits when looking at variation between different subgroups are large, and therefore the interpretation of the data, the quality of the data, needs to be considered carefully before you make interpretations on the back of it. So we're looking at that. And then finally, I just wanted to link that. Then this PCREFT, Patient Carer Race Equality Framework, relies on co-production and input from carers and service users. And so that links us to the third part of the quality and safety agenda. And we're working quite closely with Anna Took and others and the Care Programme Board that we run, establishing effective ways in which we can listen, hear and use what our service users and carers say. And that is by no means straightforward. The triangle of care data in the pack shows that we are now identifying and recording carers in the electronic patient record. The key thing is to move on to, so what are we going to do about what those people are saying? And interestingly, a nod to AI, we're piloting, Anna's using an NVQI QAI module, which uses AI to take the narrative that we hear from carers, which can be quite long, and basically reduce that into a format where managers and clinicians can use the data to inform the care that they provide. And this is in addition to the fundamental point that when managing patients clinically, part of a psychiatric history, or indeed any history, not only involves symptom signs, but also there's a psychosocial background, which includes what families and carers say. So those are some of the sort of highlights for me as chair that cropped up. I hope that's helpful. And I think we're probably moving on now to Rachel, the chief nurse, who's going to take you through the quality report. Thank you, Chair.
Super helpful. Just briefly, Kathy.
And just to give a very quick update, since the Quality and Safety Committee met on the 11th of December, we have managed to progress with the Medication Safety Officer and Antimicrobial Stewardship post. So we will be putting that out to advert.
That was going to be one of my questions.
Yeah, in the next couple of weeks. And the other thing to say about ECT then, it's got a high risk rating. I just don't want people to think that ECT isn't available to patients in the south. It is available, but they have to travel north to get it. And that is obviously a challenge and an inequity in a sense.
But we are working closely with the ICB and CUH. And Holly, in fact, is doing a walk around CUH on Friday to see whether or not there are available spaces that they haven't yet identified where we could actually set up a South ECT suite. So there's progress in both those areas since that meeting.
Okay. Well, that's encouraging to hear that something is practically happening on all of those matters, that ECT is an issue of health equality, and we would want to see that addressed with some urgency because it's been unequal for far too long. Rachel, can I go to you? And I do have a written question from one of the governors, which I will ask you to cover as well.
Okay, thank you. The board is asked to note the information in the report. Please note that the data is October-November data that was reported at the December Quality and Safety Committee. I'd like to highlight 3 specific areas, and obviously have to take them thereafter. A question that was raised previously in terms of the physical health metrics, the update that the full range of metrics used at directorate level have now been established. The next stage is to review these and agree, and for those then to be translated into reporting at trust level, i.e. by the quality report, which will come into the next public. Just to update on that. Also, I'd like to update in terms of the current flu position. We are, current figures today are at 28% for frontline staff and 31% for the whole staff group. There have been previously questions raised about this in terms of how we are comparable to other similar trusts. Our colleagues in Norfolk are performing better at 43%, and colleagues in Essex are just below us at 24%, which I think is indicative of the challenges, certainly for community mental health trusts and the geographical spread that we have. Obviously, within acute trusts, it's a very different picture. Their figures are much higher. And in talking with colleagues, this is obviously anecdote, but it's patients coming through ED with respiratory illnesses does really push staff to have their own flu vaccine. So one of the things we have done with the network across the region is to compare what we've been doing within our flu campaign to others, and they're a very similar picture. Certainly one of the areas that we would like to improve is peer vaccinators, but this obviously is a capacity issue, which we have to be cognizant in terms of not detracting from service delivery generally. And also the other area is in terms of staff reporting when they've had their vaccination outside of the trust. This is often underreported, and we're looking at ways that we can improve that. The other area that I would like to highlight is in terms of our complaints data. This has been raised previously, and to update on this, we're working on improving the response time for compliance, and looking at this in terms of process mapping. The majority of the delays sit with the quality checking part of the process. Again, within that process mapping, there were 5 stages of checking. We have reduced that to 4, but obviously we continue to have some delays with that. We're now exploring appropriate IT solutions to improve this target. This is being evaluated at the end of February. So again, hopefully for the next an update. I think it is important just to stress that whilst wanting to obviously meet targets, we also, for complainants, feedback is the quality of the response is really important in terms of the likelihood of moving on to ombudsman, etc. But also in terms of showing that due level of responsibility, care and quality in terms of responding to a complaint appropriately.
Indeed. Probably Graham together. Sure.
Yes.
And I know that's what you and colleagues are working very hard on, Rachel. Rick, one of our governors, had submitted a written question relating to an April 2024 CPC inspection of acute wards and the working age adult, the psychiatric intensive care unit for men. It was quite a detailed question, so a written answer is being prepared, but we just want to give some headlines.
Yeah, so I think first of all, thank you for the question, Rick, and I will respond in writing to you, and also happy to talk any aspect of that through directly. Yes, the inspection of April 24. I think it's helpful just to give a timeline of that, really. So the initial feedback was received on the 22nd. Actually, so it's 22nd of the 3rd. Yes, it's March inspection, in actual fact. Two areas that were highlighted immediately were that not all clinical equipment had been calibrated appropriately in line with trust policy, and the CQC, rightly so, wanted confirmation of the board cleaning rota checks and audits. In terms of we then received the draft report was received on the 17th of July 24. Obviously, there was some time delay within that, and that's quite common for our colleagues in CQC currently. I think that's the obviously their workload and management of that. The trust we returned our factual accuracy, it's difficult words to say quickly, response on the 3rd of August, and then we received the final report on the 6th of September. And we submitted the trust action plan on the 4th of October. I think it's also worth stressing that all of this is overseen by the Compliance Executive Committee, which reports into our Quality and Safety Committee. Also to stress that all directorates consider in detail the assessment outcomes and actions together. And we then have trust-wide quality improvement and/or estates improvement, etc., adopted where applicable. All local actions are monitored between core services and the compliance manager with updates to the compliance executive. I've got more detailed questions that I can go through in detail, but I think it's better to give that in writing.
That's super helpful, Rachel. Thank you. And as you know, we take a close interest in following up on all CQC visits, so grateful. Any questions at all for Rachel coming out of the policy and safety report? The complaint was the matter I was going to raise, but you touched on that. Sorry, we have slight musical chairs going on here around me. Steve will be back very shortly, I promise. It's the nature of the NHS. Things are always happening, aren't they? All right, I'm going to ask then that we move on to people and culture. Free to take the report from your committee in the first instance, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the report as read. We're reporting from the November 2024 meeting. So I think, first of all, to note that there had been, as a committee, we were assured that there was a continual increase in the rate of completion of appraisals, and that's not simply just a metric, but also in terms of we recognise that that helps to engage and retain staff by talking about their development. But clearly there is still some work to do, but we know that across the trust work is being done in all areas and that people understand the importance of it. The thickness rates have increased. We are conscious that it is that kind of time of year, but also did note that in terms of the figures that's increased. And the staff survey as at November was 36%, but did then increase after that date, which is encouraging us.
It was at 43.
Yes. In terms of the risk register, there are 24 items, and because of the way the committees are split, 4 of those fall under People and Culture Committee. And just in terms of the governance question, the Strategy Delivery Group reviews those risks, which then comes up to us at committee level, and there were no additional risks as at November. We also talked about the difference between where the BAF comes in, the board assurance framework, which Steve referred to earlier, and the operational risks. And one thing we did discuss in terms of safety to staff related to the managing lone working. and there are mitigations in place, which we are assured about at this stage. Some incredibly good work have been done in terms of the People Promise. For those that don't know, the NHS People Promise is about making the working environment better for NHS staff. And we've got not a temporary resource, but a fixed term resource that's an internal person doing the work on that. We've had really encouraging feedback so far. And also we're coming towards the end of the actual work, but now not the delivery in terms of shaping our future, which came from the Bell review, big conversations that we had. And what's been really encouraging is that it's been very much a co-production, that staff have been involved, have been included in what's been discussed and what's been delivered. And we look forward now to delivery from the team, but it looks really encouraging in terms of the framework and what the training that's going to be delivered. And then Freedom to Speak Up, we had a lot of good work is done. There's really been engagement across the trust. We know that there were challenges about some people feeling whether they could speak up, but we are seeing signs that those that felt less comfortable are now more assured that across the trust people are prepared to speak up.
Carry on, please.
Just a couple of other things I wanted to bring up in terms of allied health professions. We are partway through the strategy as a trust, but one thing we did want to note that we are the only ICB without the chief AHP role, and just wanted to note that for the board. And so actually, also the NHSE Education and Training Submission review also done with some really collaborative work done. I'll stop there and take any questions.
Any questions for Pri at all from her committee? Again, there's an awful lot of heavy lifting that occurs from the committee. Steve.
Just one point, Chair. Apologies again for dropping out. Thank you, Pri, for the update. In relation to the chief AHP role, that is being taken forward. So I think thank you for stating that we don't have one. I think I'd like to correct that with it at the moment because we will be doing that if that's okay. Really important role.
Great to hear. Thank you so much. I would like to take next, if that's okay, the behavioural framework before we revert back to the People and Agency Exception report. Because I know that this is something that you are passionate about ensuring that we embed and work with. So would you like to just talk to us a little bit about why this is such an important foundation stone for what we are trying to do here at CPFT?
Absolutely, thank you, Chair. And I'm going to steal Mr. Lagood's thunder, but Stephen's just had to step out as well. So if I sort of cast our minds back to 2022, we had a cultural review on the organisation, which was resulting in a range of concerns that our staff groups have made around representation, around diversity, around how their views were heard and their voice was listened to or not, as the case may be. And following that, there were around 23 recommendations. Those 23 recommendations were embedded in the organisation and they're being worked through considerably. And I think if we just fast forward through the work that's been done to try and address those, culture of an organisation is essential to the care that we give. And I go back to a range of references that are made with real evidence on the basis of the fact that the right culture not only allows care to be done in a way with significant discretionary effort and compassion, but also it supports those people doing that under often very difficult circumstances. We've got a group of staff that go to work every single day to try their uttermost best to look after some of the most vulnerable people in society. We have our teams that enter people's homes or care for people in the community or on our wards, and it's not an easy job. The reason why they do it is very simple, because they love to do it. They want to help. They want to make a difference. So a behavioural framework that is one that resonates with what our workforce expects from us and expects from each other, aligned to our values and aligned to principally how we work with each other and how we behave, is essential to a really positive organisation. And it is the bedrock of the strategy that we're putting together as we move forward. During my interview process and many of the conversations that I've had, Chair, a lot of people used language to me like my voice isn't heard, or I wish I could say the following. There was a real culture of people not feeling heard, not feeling that they've got the right volume of voice. We need to change that. We need to change that considerably. And not only some of our service users who feel that way, but some of our staff. And I also think, and Kathy, Rachel, looking at you yourselves for a second, our clinicians feel like that. So this is a great opportunity with a new behavioural framework to set out where we want to go to hold ourselves and each other to account for the way in which we operate. And we operate with dignity, integrity, respect, pride, and we operate within our values. I really welcome this. What I would like to say, and I think Stephen and the team at the most appropriate time to come and talk to the board with a bit more detail is how this has been created. Because this hasn't been written in a darkened room somewhere with a couple of good ideas. This has been engaged with our workforce. It's been co-produced or co-designed. Sometimes I get into trouble for the definition of co-production, but co-designed with the voices of those people that want to see it. And it's been road tested. It is now, you can see it embedded in our leadership education programs. It's in our induction programs. It will be implemented as part of our appraisal mechanisms. And this is talking principally not only about we love what we do, but more importantly, we love where we do it. I think this is an excellent piece of work, Chair, and something that I would fully support.
Thank you. And indeed, and I think many others of you may have been involved in workshops around shaping and framing this. So it is something we've made a contribution to as well ourselves. We're asked to adopt this today formally. You'll see that Stephen and myself have signed this. It's something that we all believe is critically important. So I would ask that we treat it as important. We remember that this isn't for somebody else, it's for all of us. It's the blueprint for how we all behave towards one another. And I think what we'd like to do is to take the opportunity to come back to it regularly to both test, check and challenge to make sure that we are working with it, and where our staff feel that we're falling short, that we're actually challenging ourselves appropriately. So I think I want to relay huge thanks to the staff who've worked on this, because they have worked on it with both head and heart, and there's been a great deal of heart and commitment to bring it to where it is today. So I think we're formally noting that we're adopting it. We want to work with it. We'll want to hear how it's embedding and to be part of the embedding of it, the role modelling of behaviours that our staff have told us are so important to them, and quite rightly too. In Stephen's absence, I'm just going to suggest that the people and agency report, we will note it. There were a couple of things in there that I would like Stephen to write round to the board on. Actually, one thing I'd like him to write round to the board on, which is a little bit more breakdown in the increase in casework involving ethnic minorities. I'd like to know a bit more about that.
Yeah.
But was there anything else that we could add to the list for Stephen to come back to us on, as he's been detained with an urgent matter?
No, we have asked for that to come back to the People and Culture Committee.
That's super great that you're doing that. If we could just get a little note formally to the board on that as well, that would be great. Ed.
Yes, I just wanted to pick up, I mean, Steve, you mentioned the cultural review, and some of what that discovered was to do with difficulties, particularly around ethnic minority staff. And I know you're passionately committed to kind of tackling racism within the organisation. We talked about PCRF, but maybe at some future board meeting we could have a little bit more focus on that issue explicitly. You know, what are, you know, could we see data, for example, on sickness rates that are broken down by ethnicity? We don't, it's difficult to kind of see what the issues might be from the granularity of the data that we have in front of us. That would be one suggestion, but you know, possibly more affirmative actions that we might want to take.
If you want to come in, Karen, before Steve?
Well, mine was a different question, but I've absolutely support what Ed's saying, because if you look at, for example, on the sickness, mental health is sort of going through the roof. It'd be nice to understand that from a diversity perspective. you know, is it our black stuff, is it our white stuff, what it is. So I think, and that fits into what we can find from the feedback. So I think we need to do some more digging.
Dave, do you want to come in?
I think the short answer is yes, and I think I just want to echo what Eileen and Karen have just said. Sometimes we have tools to measure this, and sometimes those tools will give us a set of data points or figures or statistics. The second thing that's probably the most important is going talking to the workforce as well, because there are some unique issues embedded in this that sometimes are difficult or uncomfortable conversations to have, but we mustn't shy away from them. We must be prepared, because any of that stuff that's out there that gets in the way of care is stuff that needs to be stopped, stuff that needs to be addressed. So I think with your agreement, one of the things that I would like us to do is schedule a board development session, a deep dive into this, and get some real time where we can kick all of the proverbial tires. There is some work that we're doing with the national team associated with this, because I wanted us to vanguard from the cultural review. And I think that meeting's been set up with Eileen and I to talk to the national team. And so we'll be able to bring that back into a future meeting, but absolutely 100% yes.
Right, thank you.
Did you have another question, and then we're going to have to move on?
Yeah, just briefly, in terms of the behavioural framework, how will we know it's making a difference? I don't know if there's been any measures identified. Any way to understand with all this brilliant work, what will we expect to see different?
So, I mean, so there'll be some clear sort of outcome measures, won't there? You know, so, you know, one would expect you'd have an impact on your staff survey score. One would expect you'd have an impact on your people pulse survey score. You know, with some of the people on culture subcommittee, we were talking about the sort of the sort of the exemplar program and some of the stay surveys and some of the other sort of, you know, engagements that we're currently doing, getting some of that feedback as well. So as we sort of implement the behavioural framework, and apologies, I had to step out, you know, for me, the next step is equally as important, if not more important, how we embed it and how we really live it and how actually people feel that they're empowered. You know, that staffness, that healthcare assistant for me, that's the critical sort of metric here. So they start giving some really positive feedback, but also through freedom to speak up, they may feel more empowered to actually step up and say, actually, you know what, I'm not living this framework, this you know, this approach. Then absolutely we'll be able to measure it and see it. I think we've got to give ourselves some time here. You know, this stuff takes, you know, time to sort of really get into the heart of the organisation as well. But actually, through the exemplar conversation we had at PNC, we're already been seeing some of those metrics change even now by actually doing this, which I think is the important part.
It will only happen if every single person is committed to making it happen, and we've got to be on that and alive to it. And to the point on freedom to speak up, it's great when people use the formal channels on freedom to speak up. You all know I'm heavily invested in that. But actually the best conversations and challenge happen because they happen in the management line, where people feel confident to say, hang on a minute, this doesn't feel quite right. That is when you've got really, really healthy culture. And that's what we are working and aspiring towards, along with much of the NHS, I should caveat that saying, but we are determined to do ever better here. I'm going to have to move us along. We've noted some things, even around people and agency to come back to. Those will be shared with you. Going to you, Brian, for the Audit and Assurance Committee.
So I'm happy to report we had a meeting earlier this month, and the that you see here, it follows that. I was particularly keen that two of our medical non-execs were able to attend, and it was a really interesting perspective for non-accountants to be in the room, and they know now where the cool guys hang out. I think that there are two. I think there are a number of points which are in the paper which obviously you can take as read. I think there are two areas that I want to draw attention to: internal audit and external audit. External audit, I think it was a very good presentation by ASETs, our external auditors, in terms of where they stood in terms of their audit approach and time tables. And there are no issues identified that should give us any cause for concern. I think what's particularly reassuring this year is that we will not be having another third party look at the valuation of all of our landed buildings. We've had 3 different valuers in the last 3 years, and it has been a tortuous and in some respects unnecessary process. But unfortunately, when one valuer values a building one way and another values it a different way, And the first valuer won't tell you how they get to their number. It makes for a very unsatisfactory and inefficient audit process. So I think it's good news that we're able to roll forward the numbers that we had from last year. So I was pleased with that, and the timetable and so on looks to be deliverable, notwithstanding the 25th of April for the annual report this year. And I suspect Chris and others are aware of the front part of the book, and finance team's aware of the numbers part of the book. And so that's the external audit bit. And the internal audit, I think there's a number of things. People sometimes don't realise what an internal audit's all about. Internal audit looks at a number of things. It looks at financial controls, and it looks at and processes, but it also looks at some of this, if I call them business processes across the organisation. And as you probably all know, and Natalie has been chasing everyone as well, but I'm really keen for us to make sure that we embrace what's required really across all of the organisation. And I've gone back to all of the committee chairs to get inputs from them as to what they might want internal audit to look at, and as a way of checking and testing what's going on within their particular the committees and the responsibilities they have within those committees. Where internal audit is really helpful is that it gives us reliance as a board and as an organisation that we get our numbers largely right within the materiality measure, which is defined by the auditing profession, and equally that we also then obviously look at whether the processes that we have operating at a more operational level are also working properly. When the internal auditors come in, they produce reports. The reports produce recommendations, and the onus of clearing out the recommendations falls to the executives who are responsible for those particular areas. And I think the timing was unfortunately 15 outstanding items in the January meeting. And I think the timing has been unhelpful because some of those are subject to follow-up reports, which are about to be done in the case of consultant job planning, for example. And there are a number of other matters which were raised and which have been, through my mouth off the table, a number of others around, for example, the salary sacrifice scheme, which are have been completed but haven't yet been ticked off. So the number is high, but it's not as bad as it looks. If I can put that. When we finished all the internal audit work for the year, the partner responsible for internal audit at RSM is responsible for giving us an overall evaluation of our performance during the year. We scored badly last year. We were marked down because of some issues around medicines management, which have all since been dealt with. I think we have still to prove that we deserve the higher rating this year. And my usual message back to everyone involved is please clear your management actions quickly, because that then allows the internal audit team to take some more comfort from the actions are being taken forward. And we remain hopeful, if not positive, that we'll get back to a good rating for this year.
Kathy, do you want to come in?
Yes,
I'm very happy to give an update on the consultant job planning. So we've had a major push on this recently. And of the 10 actions from RSM, the internal auditors, we've cleared 6 of them already, and the 4 are all on track. There's going to be a slight delay with the guidance. The reason for this is that NHSC brought out new guidance in September 2024, and the BMA have responded to that and have a number of queries. And this isn't just impacting on us, but a number of organisations. The BMA tell us that we're probably a little bit ahead of the curve compared to some of our neighbours in the ICS. We have a target also set by NHSE for 95% job and sign-offs by April. And we have a very ambitious trajectory, which we presented at the People and Culture Board. We actually have appointed one consultant to be our kind of workforce lead. She's starting to do job plans at the rate of 7 per week. And then my deputy, Catherine Maxey, is actually supporting the OPAC director, where the clinical director is a psychologist, and getting through 2 a week. So unless there are unexpected blips, we hope that we will be on track by April. So we're feeling fairly confident, and I've shared that plan with Steve as well.
Well, that's really good to hear. When I on the executive side of the table myself, I used to talk to sceptical colleagues about it's not just a cool place to be, but it's a place where actually you get really good indications around where improvement can happen. And in internal audit in particular, we pay quite a lot of money for, and it gives us real-time intelligence about areas where we can improve. And so thinking about what we need, what we want to know more about, using that resource to get best value from it is really, really important. Good to hear about actions being closed down, and they really do need to be. All righty, I'm going to move on then to the final two items on the agenda. The first it sits between Steve and Kathy, I believe, and this is about the establishment as a formal subcommittee of this board of an entity that's going to focus on Cambridge Children's Hospital, which for us is a very major and important project, and something that I think we would want to ensure that we were having a locus for asking all the right questions, not to say that questions won't be asked in other places. But Steve and Kathy, do you just we are being asked here to ratify some draft terms of reference. So
yeah,
both of you.
I'll kick off and be very, very brief. Thanks, Chair. It is to ask the board to agree to the establishment of the subcommittee and to the proposed terms of reference. And as you've alluded to, it's a really important, exciting, innovative and important project, and we are a key partner in it. And the committee will enable there to be the time and the expertise applied to fully understand the opportunities and challenges that it may bring from a CPFT perspective, which is really important, and also enables us to be taking decisions in a timely way as a good partner in the project. So the subcommittee will help with that, and the terms of reference are set out. The only point just to flag in the terms of reference is that we are suggesting 3 non-exec directors. We currently have 2, so perhaps today, but at some point a question perhaps to ask ourselves for a third NED. But that's what I was going to say. And with Kathy.
I think that says it all. I'm very pleased, Eileen, that you suggested this. We have had an internal committee, but I think we've got some really significant decisions to make now that we've entered the FPC stage of the process. So I think it's really important that this is well cited and there's shared decision making in board level.
That's super. So I'm asking around the table that we ratify this. As Kathy says, a committee has existed already, but this is just giving it a little bit more rigour and a formal route through to reporting into the board. So I'm delighted to see that happen. If there are any NEDs not involved with it who would like to be involved with it, well, please give me later or drop me a note. We will be inundated, I'm sure. That then takes me to the final item on the agenda, where I'm looking to Jackie and Ed. This is about the Charitable Funds Management Committee. This is head to toe that we're talking about. Terms of reference there, just updating them a little bit and to put the emphasis on the charitable activities more than the financial management of said financial activities. Not that it's not important, but to remind ourselves that this is a precious asset that we have. So, Jackie, you're going to speak to this, I think.
Thank you, Eileen, and I'll be super quick. Yes, this went through a couple of reiterations at recent committee meetings where all NEDs and members of the committee had an opportunity to contribute. This is the final version. Just to make a correction in this report, it's not for approval. Approval will be later on this afternoon at the Board of Trustees for the Head to Toe charity. And thank you to Hannah and Lauren for their input into this, along with Chris. So we neatened it up. It's a simpler version, and it's the title has changed, so it's actually mentions head to toe. I don't know whether you wanted to make any further comment.
I think you've covered it off, Jackie. Thanks.
All right. So just for the minute, we're noting this, we're welcoming it, but it will be for the Board of Trustees, which is essentially nearly everybody in this room, but we'll be meeting later to talk about the annual report and accounts for head to toe to actually formally adopt and ratify these. So thank you, Ed and Jackie, for the work you're doing there. us having completed the agenda and my having said at the outset that it was a very busy meeting, we unfortunately do not have any time for further questions. My thanks to those who contributed during the course of the meeting. You've had some responses in the chat. Others will follow, I'm sure. Natalie been picking those out and fielding them to various people. My thanks to everybody here. We meet formally in public again in March, which will be all too quick coming around. But thank you so much for your time today and to everybody who's helped to make the meeting possible. Thank you so much. Bye now. Thank you.